new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at upenradio.com.
Welcome back to the Larry Yates As IsWe show, and this is He on the Move. Actually, I'm sitting still right now. As you would probably notice in a very short while here that Warren and Carla is out doing their thing. They had some family and lovely stuff to do, and Miss Carolyn Wilkins has had lots of great things to do, and Lisa is not here with us, which means I get to sit down to talk with one of the most intelligent and talented young men in Hollywood. I have Mr. Addison
Witt.
Thank
you for the young man.
Addison, it's a pleasure to have you back. Now,
Thank you.
Everybody that know me on this show here, they know I would butcher up a name, and I got to do better with that. It's not that I don't pay attention to the name; it's that I'm not from America. I'm from Mississippi, and so we had to get used to calling names and stuff. But thanks for coming back.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
How's life been treating you?
Life is treating me great, and it's a pleasure to be here. So many great things have been happening. It's been very interesting. The last couple of days, I've noticed something where everywhere I've walked and been, people have really gone out of their way to be friendly, to be extra kind.
Wow.
It's been interesting.
But you have that kind of spirit.
I'm glad.
Yeah, no, really, that was one. We got a lot of emails and blogs and text messages about the show last week. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I wanted you to come back, but one of the reasons I wanted you to come back and just finish up and sit down, and just you and I have a sit-down one-on-one talk, and because you were so clear and so knowledgeable about the business of Hollywood and just what the stuff that you were speaking about. And so I'm just so glad to have you back here, and you do have that kind of energy. I was telling Mr. Addison that he needs his own show because off the air here for a minute, you started asking me a question, and I got nervous like I was being interviewed.
Man. You're too kind, indeed.
Yeah, so lots going on out there.
It is a lot.
I know we got so much to talk about. What I'm going to do, and this is a little bit different because you're the first just sit-down talk on the show that we've had.
I'm honored.
And most of the time it's a mixture of stuff here, but we can cover all these different areas. But I want to throw something out there because everybody's talking about politics, and just follow me a little bit. You don't have to, I don't want you to get too deep into politics because I'm sick like that. But with this Eric Cantor and the Tea Party situation, I call them tea baggers. I'm not going to clean up their name the way they talked about black people. But we seem to see a shift in the politics within the Republican Party. It's almost as if that they are eating their young, as they say. There's a big divide there. And then with the Tea Parties or tea baggers coming into power, a lot of the anger that seems to be among them kind of catapulted us into what happened in Las Vegas with the gun shooting.
It's a matter of desperation. And when you have factions vying for power and control and collapsing from within, we are seeing in our entire nation a collapse of our value systems. We are bumping into each other. It is a quality of eating your young. And we're seeing young people that I think it's a lack of real significant leadership.
Yes.
And people are taking control in their own hands. Young people have watched the politicians, the adults do it, the media do it for years and years, and they're destroying each other.
You know, one of the things when they talk about politics, and I pretty much like to call it as I see it, and it does not make me right. Because when we're looking at the school shootings, we see most of the stuff is from the top down.
Yeah.
When you have no leadership, just like you just said, you have no leadership, then with that comes the crumbling of the tower. And so I see that when you look at, we had in the African American community the gangbangers in the 80s that was really, but it was a fight for gang turf. I'm not excusing it. It was horrible. And then crack was involved. It was money on the streets. Territory. And then, but now you see these mainly young white males going into schools that are doing these shootings. Then you look at this white supremacist group that put a swastika on a fallen officer and a snake on a fallen officer, and then go and commit suicide. And white America is arming itself, and I think due to the rhetoric that's been preached by a lot of it by the Republican Party and the Tea Party. They're moving so far to the right, but the thing that they're tapping into, I believe, is that I think white males in America feel emasculated, and one of the most that's what makes a bully. A lot of people don't. When you get a bully, and I know that you work with bullies.
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of times people don't realize that a bully male basically feel emasculated, and he feel that the only way he can get his point across or be strong is to be violent.
Yes.
So you're seeing a lot of these men that's taking back their country, taking back their manhood, but they're doing it with the purchasing and ownership of guns. How do you feel about that? I mean,
well, you know, it's such a complex issue because you have that level of insecurity that you're talking about that is so pervasive, where men specifically, feel emasculated, that they no longer have a voice. They don't have a voice in their own communities. And I can appreciate that, but I also see that there is a huge issue of mental illness in our nation.
Oh, wow.
And I think, and unfortunately, you know, my sister was diagnosed many years ago with bipolar disorder and schizoaffective behavior, meaning that she hears voices. And many of the young people that have been profiled after these shootings, we've discovered that there have been real serious issues of mental illness. So I think it's so complex,
yes,
which is one of the reasons it is not the issue is not adequately addressed in our nation, because we can't put our finger on it and say this is what it is.
Yes.
Therefore, we must now rid ourselves of it.
Okay, well, you know, that's a very interesting point, because let's talk about mental illness. What do you think the problem is? We're not getting mental illness. They're not getting the help. People are embarrassed to say that their loved one have a mental condition.
Yeah.
And so there's denial in the family. Do you think? I'm asking. I don't know.
You know, yeah, there's still stigma. And people, I remember for us, I mean, this has been well over 12, 15 years in my family, and the entire family goes on this journey. And it was very difficult in the beginning to really talk about mental illness, to talk about how it's affecting a close family member. But on a larger scale, where you have institutions that were closed down in this country, all across this country, and many mentally ill people live on the streets or have been housed in jails. And the jails have now become a modern-day mental institution in cities all across this country.
Wow, what a great point. I never thought of that.
And so they're in jail for a short period of time. They're released on the streets. And then you have the bipolar disorder, the schizophrenia that is rampant among young people, children being earlier diagnosed with significant mental illnesses.
Well, what about some of these medications that they're on? I mean, I look at some of the medication, which is scary to me, all in itself, because you're listening to them promote this medication, but then the side effects is
they're
so
dreadful.
Terrible. It's
They're
just
dreadful. My sister, on top of being diagnosed with mental illness, was recently diagnosed with MS, and that's because she has lesions on her brain. And it is my opinion that those lesions were caused by the side effects from the medication.
Oh,
and so it perpetuates one illness after another. And that's also something that is a very volatile subject in our nation, because we have doctors that are over-prescribing medication of all kinds. We, again, have believe and have this notion that if we give you a pill, if that will solve, that's the panacea that will solve all of our problems. And so we've got so many things that we're trying to deal with in our nation, and we're looking for individuals or pockets of groups to help us make sense of what's going on. And God forbid that our children should be shooting each other and killing each other across this nation.
I mean, how do you wrap your mind around that we have a generation of kids that is afraid to go to school? Now, when I was coming up, I mean, I'm from Mississippi, but I wasn't afraid to go to school. I mean, I've done a good job at going to school, but we actually have parents now that are afraid to send the kids to school. And I heard someone say the other day that, when I was coming up, police officers didn't wear bulletproof vests. Now we have, every time you look up, you see you got RoboCop getting out of a vehicle, because now the trend is that they are actually being targeted. And my prayers go out to the family of those officers, and I know that has to be pretty hard to deal with. But it is so much of we are battling each other without sitting down and talking to each other. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves of what Americans are doing is that we're not talking to each other. We are talking at each other. We'll talk against each other, and we'll talk about each other, but we don't talk to each other. We don't listen to each other. And I think that many homes now are falling apart because of the lack of communication within the homes. The schools are falling apart because of lack of communication between the kids and the teachers. And we look at everybody now is depending on this different forms of entertainment just to be their companion. And technology has become the companion, where you look at people that's sitting at the table, 5 people sitting at the table, 5 people got a phone in their hand.
And everybody's got a phone.
And everybody's texting.
Yeah. I call it the age of individualism, and I see it every day where people, we are afraid in many instances to say things to other people. I sometimes will take public transportation. I live in the Valley in Sherman Oaks, and I will see people on the bus or see people in the community. Everybody's texting. You go to any office, everybody's on their phone. If you see a person that is outrageous, or a homeless person or a mentally ill person that has something to say, talking out to themselves, no one's going to get involved. No one's going to say anything.
That's true.
There was a guy recently had a weapon, and he said to another man who slightly bumped into him, "You bump into me again, and I've got something for you," as he's digging in his bag to pull out a weapon. just bumped into him, slightly bumped into him. And no one wants to get involved because no one wants to get shot.
Yeah.
No one wants to see a knife, or no one wants to deal with that or confront that type of altercation.
And it's out there. I mean, you look at road rage, and when you start looking at the condition of, and the reason I'm talking like this because I'm talking about the condition of the nation
Absolutely.
now, and we are so bombarded with what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on in Iraq, what's going on in all of these other countries, and we are abandoning what's going on in our own neighborhood. In fact, it's a strange thing. You don't really hear people say my neighborhood anymore. They'll say my apartment.
Right.
I'm going to my house, or I'm going home. People don't really even acknowledge their neighbors anymore. I mean, and so I don't know what's going on. We have a collapse of social of socializing.
I think we're just afraid to get into anyone's face or to reach out. I know exactly what you're saying. I will sometimes stand outside in my neighborhood and notice that the differences from when I was a kid in Texas and lived in my neighborhood. I notice here that people will drive past me on the street and not look my direction, not notice who is in the neighborhood, who's standing outside. And sometimes I'm standing outside in a bathrobe. And I think, no one's paying attention to the man standing in the bathrobe?
Yes.
Whereas when I was a kid, you knew exactly who was in your neighborhood.
Yes.
You knew what they were doing. If there was a man standing in a bathrobe, you paid attention to it. You didn't know if he was going to open up streets or
you didn't know what he was doing.
What was going to happen, but you were aware.
Yes.
Now people are not aware.
I noticed. You and I was talking a few minutes ago about eye contact, and I noticed that a lot of times we're not making eye contact with each other. You and I travel a lot, both abroad and domestically, and I just come back from a trip across the country with a very good friend of mine. And Dr. Joy, and the lesson that we learned on this trip about the country and the mood of the country, it was almost, you get into different states, you got into a different mood.
Yes.
You get into another state, you get into a different consciousness or the lack of. Then you get to see the bitterness, you get to see the distance where people don't want to see you. They don't want to be bothered with you. And until they need you. But that's another thing. And I don't know. I think, and what I look at now is when we look at what is happening with our young people, where are they finding this? Where are they getting this feeling of hopelessness from? When I think about children feeling hopeless, how do you teach a kid to feel that there's no hope? If there was ever a time to feel hope, when we were coming up as kids, I don't know anybody, very few. It was a very few because suicide wasn't as high. Self-mutilation wasn't as bad. But what I see now, and I look in the eyes of so many young people that have no hope. And where does that come from? How do you address that?
It's so difficult because you're talking about a whole society of people and pockets of people in different states and where people are coming from. Yeah. And what is the leadership saying? Where is the leadership?
Good point.
How do we even wrap our heads around the leadership who have a lot of personal problems themselves, and who are children looking up to? Are they looking up to their parents? Are their parents impacting their own homes? We're so fragmented. Yeah. And we don't know where to turn other than to our technology, because as of right now, the technology is giving us the answers.
I tell you one thing that I feel is that, and I'm a big mouth, I talk about this a lot. Parents, all of us are in some form of pain. And I believe there's when you look at these children that is feeling no hope, I think And I believe that it's come from parents that is in pain. And the parents, and most of the parents are single women nowadays. And the burden that has fallen on the single mother is unbelievable. And so the single mother has a lot of pain that she's dealing with. She's the breadwinner, she's the mother, she's the father. And so many of these cases you see, and it's not just in the African American community anymore. And mothers are not having the opportunity to be mothers. Even when you have two breadwinners in the home, mothers can't be mothers anymore because they both are working so hard just to pay the bills.
Make the ends meet.
And it's hard to be happy in a home when the mother and the father is fighting among each other because they both want so much more than what they're getting. And it creates a friction in the home because it's hard to be struggling and happy. It's not impossible.
Sure.
but when you look at the unhappiness in the home between two parents or one single parent, and the kids have been bombarded with these sales pitch. And I believe some of the anger from the parents that is translated into the kids is because they get to see what they can't afford every day, all day. They have to say no to the children so much, not from an entitlement point of view, but just some of the basic things that a parent want to give their kids, where it has to be medicine. All the money got to go towards medicine or food or just basic living. And the parents themselves starts to feel like failures. And if a parent feels like a failure, then guess what the child is going to feel?
Oh, yeah, they pick it up. They absorb those feelings, that behavior. But, Larry, you said something then that just really struck a chord with me in terms of lack of resources. I mean, my parents were married. My parents divorced. My mother was single for a while. But I also came from a very large family in Texas. My great-grandparents had 14 children. They came from 14 children. It's the South. And we had a farm. So that made a huge difference because I always had relatives and people surrounding me. But you just said something that just struck this chord, which is about economics. Mm-hmm. And I think there is such a disparity in how we value money.
Oh, yes.
What we do, and therefore equate ourselves or our valuations with money. Therefore, if you don't have it, there's a lack. Therefore, then there must be something lacking within yourself.
Right.
And that's what I think is very important that needs to be addressed and reevaluated, particularly with children. Those of us that are adults, it's very difficult to turn those things around.
Right.
But we have to reach the children and help them understand your value, your self-worth is not connected to the money.
Right.
The money is great, the money is important, and the money can also afford freedoms and help do things that, you are not able to do without it. But it is not about your self-worth.
That is so great because, what? I'm spending off you. What I have learned, what I learned from me, that I have to be bigger than my obstacles.
Yeah.
I have to be bigger than my challenges. Mm-hmm. And once the challenges become bigger than me,
they're
then
insurmountable.
I'm going to feel defeated.
That's right.
And I can remember points in time like when people ask me and they say, "Well, have you ever been poor as an adult?" No, I've never been poor as an adult because I've never been without a refrigerator. I've never been without running water as an adult. And if it was cut off, it was temporary. It wasn't a way of life. So when you don't appreciate the gifts that you do have, you do look over at the Joneses and them validate yourself. We're going to take a break, and we talked about a little politics here. We'll be back with Mr. Addison, and what are we going to play here? I Love That Boy. We're going to do I Love That Boy. Corey, help me out with Corey Love. Mm-hmm. All right, this is Larry Yates. We'll be right back.
Leaving my phone at Savvy pulling closer to me. The club is jumping, but don't nobody exist here but we. Alright, baby. Yeah. Oh, it's gonna be a good night, baby. He always makes me feel like I'm the only girl that he sees. And on his carpet, baby, I'm the only celebrity. All night, baby. It's gonna be a good night, baby. 'Cause I got the hottest boy on the planet. All the girls wanna have that, but he only wants me. I love that boy. Closer to heaven whenever I see him. I love that, I love that, I love that boy. Oh, we'll go down history. For me, there's nothing he wouldn't do, boy. I love that boy.
Hey, we're back. Mr. Addison, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we didn't. I had to talk a little bit of politics, but this. I got to tell you, reading your bio is just it's a fascinating thing.
Oh, thank you.
Tell the listeners about yourself and your manage and your business.
Okay.
In the industry.
Well, first of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate being here today with you and you inviting me back.
Yes.
I'm honored, truly. I love what you do, and you're a very prolific man, and it's great to have people like you.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Fighting for the cause, if you will.
Yeah.
I have been in the entertainment industry here in Los Angeles for about 23 years, and I owned a talent management company for years, representing actors in TV, film. I also owned an acting studio. So I've really advocated on behalf of the creative, the artist, and have done what I could to help either open doors or support them when those doors have been open. I've been privileged to travel around the world. One of my passions is dogs.
Now, I got to tell you, when you told me that blew my mind. And
love dogs.
Yes. How did you tell us a little bit about working with that?
Well, I had been working with actors in television and film, and a friend approached me several years ago and asked me what I knew about dogs, dog actors. And, I grew up with Lassie, and Benji, and Rin Tin Tin.
Rin Tin Tin,
You remember?
yeah.
Great German Shepherd. And so I told them what I knew, and some friends of mine developed a TV series on Lifetime called Off the Leash, and I happened to star on that series.
Really?
I did, and then that took me to Canada, and I did a series there, and then wound up going to England and did a series there called Top Dog Model. But to back up slightly, I was raised on a farm in Texas, and I've had more than 23 different breeds of dogs. So
23 different breeds.
I think they are a most special species on the planet. A dog is the only species you can walk down the street with, and people will be nicer to you. Those that are not afraid of dogs, of course.
Yes.
You can't do that with an elephant.
Yeah, no, only that. So what do you how did you get into the entertainment industry? What propelled you into this?
Well, I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I had been a theater major and knew that I wanted to work in the entertainment industry to some capacity. So when I came to California, I was a young actor. I had, fortunately, because I had had a business background, I found myself telling other actors how to create careers or businesses. And that led to several actors booking jobs. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I keep advising people, and nobody's paying me a percentage here. So I formed a business. And I was talking with a friend one day at Zuma Beach, and I said, I feel compelled to teach. And I was just taught in my life for my family to follow your passions, the things that you're interested in doing. Where there's a will, there's a way. And within 2 weeks, I was teaching acting classes, and then that led to managing people. And I figured that I would work within the entertainment industry and get a chance to do a lot of things that I wanted to do, and therefore I have. I've done a lot of commercials.
Oh, wow, yes.
And produced projects, advocated on behalf of the disabled, and more diversity in television and film.
Well, speaking of television and film, and I want to talk about some of the changes in there, and just tying a little bit into the consciousness of young people, all people today. Do you believe that that TV influenced the how young people are acting out in certain ways now?
Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, television, the power of that medium has always had a tremendous influence on the watcher, the observer. And even more so now. You know, I was very fortunate to have clients on the TV series Breaking Bad. And Breaking Bad has had a phenomenal influence in our culture and society. Number one, the way TV series are shot, the subject matter. Subject matter has become more provocative. You know, young people always feel invincible.
Yes.
They want to try
this is
anything
true. This is
new.
true. Yes.
And so, again, you remember, you know, when we were probably children, I remember coming home, and at that time I would watch Gilligan's Island, Leave It to Beaver, and the reruns that were popular at that time. But today, the subject matter that people really have to confront, it is very provocative.
I tell people we're living as the debris, and I don't mix my voice when I say that, mix my word, the debris of Jerry Springer times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at the debris of it, I believe, and quality is just out the door. It is just gone, and now you got all these reality TV. So what do you see changing in the industry?
You know, I think there are two things that are going on. I think, one, there's this need for more and more sensationalism, shock value, to get more and more viewers to pay attention. That's one thing that's happening. On the other hand, I think we do have very smart, intelligent writers and people that are conscientious and are using television in a way to bring people together. It is a most powerful medium. You know, I remember when Oprah Winfrey started out, that was part of her mission, to use television in a way that can bridge the gap, that can bring people together. And her talk show became a very powerful tool in doing that. I think there has to be, again, the consciousness where we consider the long-term effects that our words, our stories, our images have, not only on the current generation, but those that are coming after.
Now, do you see that there's a need for changing of the guard, so to speak, as far as in executive positions? Where I'm an advocate for getting more and more women involved in decision-making roles. And I know that there's a struggle with African Americans being in decision-making roles. I don't know if the gay and lesbian community has that same struggle in Hollywood. I don't know that. But I do see a need for more African Americans, both males and females. But especially, I'm just an advocate for females, and I think if we get more women in some of these leadership positions, that women would be a little bit more sensitive if they have the power to actually make the decision.
Now, this is a hot button topic, if there ever was one. And I say that because, you know, having been in the entertainment industry for a lot of years, the first line of defense often are women, casting directors, agents. At the studio level now, there are a lot of women that are running. Oh, yes, running the studios. There are certainly more filmmakers. You know, over 50% of film school graduates are women. So there are more and more women that are infiltrating the industry. But as you break this down and you start talking to women on an individual level, what I have read, what I have found is that women sometimes have issues with trusting other women, particularly when it comes to backing them financially. And that's a serious issue that needs to be addressed and discussed. I think there are more inroads that are created for women. However, I think it boils down to financiers and where they're willing to put their money. If the system isn't broken, from a financier's perspective, from a network's perspective, what they are doing works. Why change it?
Well, now that when I say women in position of power, that you just touch upon the main portion of that, because to have women investing more into women in position, because most of the time, as I understand it, and I come from the music industry, and when I first, and we was a distributor, I'm a distributor.
Yes.
And I didn't meet women in the distribution industry. And when I brought Miss Carolyn Wilkins along, one of the reasons we started to work together was because when I met her, I blew my mind that she understood distribution. And so, but it seems that when women have the skills to produce, to write, to put together a good package, they have to go to men for investments.
Yeah.
And there again, you're going from, it's the same cycle, because men then reject the storyline or the project because they want it to be tailored the way they want it to be tailored,
right,
rather than the way the woman, the writer, or the producer want to see it. So then you get the same cookie warmed over again, so to speak.
I think you're right. It is about the distribution, and it's about the people in power that have the ability to finance, to move projects along, and it has to come. There has to be more women and people of color that are involved in the level of distribution, in the power players level.
That's and I preached this, and we talked about this the last time we was on the show, and I think some people didn't understand that they don't understand distribution. I think dialogue is good, but we have to study distribution in the entertainment industry. And women, I haven't seen where women are studying distribution itself. How do they get into distribution? How do they get into some seat of control? Because even if you got the budget, you still have that big brick wall that you either got to climb or have someone to cut a hole in it, called distribution.
That's the target. And I think what happens oftentimes, certainly in Hollywood, is that there is an old idea about the way things work. If I have a product, I take it to you.
Yes.
You express an interest in my product. If you are in a position to pick up the phone, to call a studio or call someone, you can help me get my product
But you know what?
made.
I'm going to have to ask you, I'm going to have to back up a little bit. Why do you think women have a problem trusting women?
I think that's an age-old question where, I think people in general have an issue trusting, but I think with women, and I remember last week we had referenced competition, and that was a hot button that someone called in and discussed about that. Why should women even feel obligated to act on behalf of another? I don't know that it's an obligation. I think it's more about respect for someone of a similar gender that is fighting the same cause. When it comes to trust issues, and this is from a story I picked up that happened.
Please. Because I'm gonna let you out there on your own with this one.
I picked up this story from an incident that occurred at the Sundance Film Festival, and there were a couple of filmmakers in the room, and they were discussing financing, getting projects made, and this was a comment made by a noted filmmaker that the problem I see is trusting. Putting my money behind another woman, and I don't know that it's a deliberate idea. I think it comes down to, again, the old philosophy that if I put my money behind a man, I can count on a man. He's going to produce a project. These are massive productions. He's going to be in control.
Let me ask you this question, because I run across this in the music industry. One of the reasons I want to get women to be kind of a conduit or a channel of communication between women, because I ran across so many women that would see another woman in position, but they would question how she got that position.
Mm-hmm.
Where if it was a man that got that position, it was more on his merits, on his work. Generally, every now and again you have some other ideas to fall in, but for the most part, when you saw a woman in a position, it was always questioned about who did she sleep with, and
it's that old double standard.
And that still amazes me that women are still battling with that. And you talk about affirmative action.
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking about a couch action.
Yes. Yes.
And how do we as men in the industry work with women on just having a dialogue, just to sit down and talk? Because you work with a lot of women. And by the way, I love having Summer here.
She's great.
Yes.
She's funny as heck.
Yes, funny as heck. But, I'm just trying to help women to sit down and listen to each other. Don't necessarily agree, but listen to each other, because if we can get women to use, God, the powers that they have, I mean, Jesus Christ, there's so much we can do, not just in business, but the whole nation, if not the world.
I so agree. I think that, it's still that old double standard. And it's interesting, Larry, because when you look at universities across our nation, the numbers speak for themselves. There are more women that are obtaining degrees than there are men.
Yes.
Yet, when it comes to hiring practices, women are still behind. So it's a very serious issue that we are dealing with, not just in Hollywood, but still in our nation.
Yeah, well, because I was listening to when the president signed in the equal pay for equal work for women. And it blew my mind to hear so many women, whether it was right-wing or Republicans or just women, that say that was almost like affirmative action. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's staggering to think that someone would say, well, if a man worked 8 hours with the same job, a woman works 8 hours with the same job, that the man gets more. And it's just something really, really wrong with that.
And yet when so many women are the heads of households.
And so many women are heads of households.
Yeah.
Because when the economy falls, the women are hurt first, because not only are they the first to, the first to be fired. That used to be the African-American thing, where we're last to be hired and first to be fired.
Right.
And
it's just like in a movie, the first to be killed.
Well, you're the first to be killed in the movie. But I think a lot of in tagging the men on this.
Yeah.
I need strong women. I just must have strong women in my life. And a lot of times I see women struggling in relationships as well, where men are intimidated by having a strong woman in the relationship. And then you have those two. You have that man that wants a strong woman, but he wants to lay on the sofa and she take care of him.
Yeah.
Then you have that one that don't want a strong woman because I'm the man. But then there's that middle man like myself that needs a strong woman to push me, to help elevate me, so then I can turn and hopefully elevate her and elevate other women. And I think that is missing within relationships between women and men a lot, or has not been identified.
There's so many issues when it comes to gender equality and the roles that we all play. A lot of the roles have changed over the last 50 years.
Very good point.
And how we identify with each other, how we identify with our own sexuality, what does it mean, how provocatively we dress. Women are not sex objects. It was just like the young college graduate recently that was breastfeeding her child in public.
Yes.
And a lot of people commented on that and said inappropriate. And she basically said, I graduated college. I'm very proud of this incident. And that has become a bigger issue also in terms of, again, people's bodies. I believe it's very important that women are strong and that men are strong as well.
Yes.
I was fortunate, as I said, with my great-grandparents having 14 children. 7 were women and 7 were men. And I had the benefit of being reared by all these very strong people.
You bring up a very good point as well when you said the roles of change and genders and being comfortable with people being comfortable with their bodies. And I remember when I first started the show, the first show I did here was a recovering homophobe because I remember when I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember when I had an epiphany. Mm-hmm. And now I embrace the fact that people have a right to be or love whom they choose. Mm-hmm. I know now that it's not my call, and I don't. And I was never mean-spirited.
Sure.
It was just that I was taught wrong under the merits of what's going on in the world today. I was behind the times, And then once you look at people as individuals, their own individual struggles, their own individual dreams and hopes, and the need for companion, and the thing that and I'm only speaking of this because time is so short here. When we go into the gender thing, I had a friend that was gay, mm-hmm. and this was a few years ago. His partner passed away, and from whatever disease. Doesn't matter. He lost his partner, but he couldn't go to the hospital to be by his bedside. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe that my ignorance didn't cause it, but played a part in creating an environment for those who was totally against it to function.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
And so when you said that the roles have changed, genders have changed, I absolutely embrace that now. I understand that now and want to be better with this show and my own action at putting all of that together and moving forward with because this is the future now.
I think growth is hard for all of us. And the pendulum often must swing to an extreme before it comes back and finds its center and where we can all function. And I think there's just a lot of growing pains in the nation, certainly the world, but definitely in our nation. This is our community.
Yes.
And we have a lot of growing pains, and we're trying to figure it all out while not getting each other's way. But again, talk to each other. And that's why your show is so relevant. What you do and others like you,
thank you.
You create a platform to dialogue.
I appreciate it, and I'm only moving forward because I'm looking at the clock behind you. Rick Perry, mm-hmm. the governor of Texas,
my home state,
was in San Francisco yesterday, and he made a statement about the gay community. And they asked him something about the gay community. And he said that the way he answered it, I'm paraphrasing, that he has the propensity to be an alcoholic. But I choose not to be an alcoholic, and to equate someone's life
with the disease of alcoholism.
What's so profound about it is that Larry Yates is sitting here saying that's not right.
Yeah.
If someone had told me, okay, Dr. Joy, if someone had told me 2 years ago, 5 years ago, that I would be sitting here saying that was a stupid statement that he made, I wouldn't have believed it. But like you said, growth, it comes hard. But you know what? In order to grow, you got to break something.
Yes.
You don't make an omelet unless you break a shell. A tree cannot grow unless the seed is broken.
Yeah.
A fruit cannot be eaten unless you break the skin. So in order to grow, something has to be broken. And a baby cannot be born unless the water break. And so I embrace the fact that I'm breaking something in Larry. I'm constantly breaking something in Larry because I have this desire to grow. And I know, what time are we looking at right now? We're about done.
Wow.
And this is but please give us some words of wisdom as we go.
Thank you. First of all, this went by so fast. And again, I was honored. But I think with all the challenges that we face now, and our own individualism, we're trying to figure it out. I think we still must always look within and take the time to really look at other people. That's how we connect to each other. Look at people and see the God in them. Mm-hmm. We often talk about seeing the God within ourselves, and you must see that reflection within yourself. But see it in others, and it will change your perspective. I also just wanted to give honor to Ruby Dee.
Yes, Ruby Dee. Thank you for bringing up her name. Lovely.
Absolutely. Great woman and actress, and she follows Dr. Maya Angelou.
Yes.
And she played in the film I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
That's right.
So the two of them.
And so we want to throw our love and honor to two powerful women, Dr. Maya Angelou and Ruby Dee.
Yes.
And I want to end by saying that, we as human beings, we are a part of a whole consciousness. And if we can understand that we are all a part of a one consciousness, then we don't have to fight so hard to get to know each other so much as we need to fight to get to know ourselves. Once we get to know ourselves, that'll open us up and we can get to know others. But we must sit down and listen. We must listen to each other. We can't talk over each other. We can't talk at each other. We can't just spend a lot of time talking about each other. If we want to move forward, sometime just take the time to listen. Remember, a nation can rise no higher than it elevates its woman. This is Larry Yates As IsWe Show. Thank you, Mr.
Witt.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's Aaron and Scott. What were you thinking? Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9